Okay, so we're supposed to be doing today Mem Test Amud Beis, but we are currently on Mem Test Amud Aleph at the two dots at the about a third of the way down in the narrow lines. So the Gemara said, what we had just concluded was that a person has to say V'chol she'ein I'm a bris Torah berachas haaretz malchus beis David v'ani Yerushalayim was lo yatzi deicha v'asai. And then the Gemara said about Hatev HaMetiv, if it needs malchus or it doesn't need malchus in it. We said maybe that's the difference between if you understand that the bracha of Hatev HaMetiv is D'oraisa D'Rabbanan. We'll come back to both of those points today. So says the Gemara, Tana Rabbanan, Mahu Chayse B'Vinyan Yerushalayim. And then bracha of Bani Yerushalayim, how do you conclude the bracha of Bani Yerushalayim? Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda, Imar Mashiach Yisrael. The way you conclude the bracha of Bani Yerushalayim is that you say Mashiach Yisrael, Hashem who saves the Jewish people. Says the Gemara, what? Mashiach Yisrael and Binyan Yerushalayim loy. The way you say the way you conclude the bracha of Bani Yerushalayim is only allowing for Mashiach Yisrael, that Hashem who saves the Jews, but not for Bani Yerushalayim. That can't be. Obviously, the bracha of Binyan Yerushalayim should conclude with something to do with Yerushalayim. So says the Gemara, Ela'ema af Mashiach Yisrael. No, rather what you could say is, of course, the way you should end the bracha of Ben Yerushalayim is with Binyan Yerushalayim. But if you ended it with Mashiach Yisrael, that could also work. Let's see Rashi. Ela'ema af Mashiach Yisrael. Even Mashiach Yisrael could work as a way to conclude the bracha of Ben Yerushalayim. In Balachtai Mashiach Yisrael, V'loi Chosam Bani Yerushalayim. If you wanted to conclude the bracha with Mashiach Yisrael, Hashem who saves the Jews rather than who builds Jerusalem, Yatza, that could work. Sheteshuas Yisrael Hi Binyan Yerushalayim, because the saving of the Jewish people is the building of Jerusalem. Keep that in mind. We'll come back to that again later. Says the Gemara, Rabba bar Avhuna ikla Reish Galusa. The Gemara says that Rabba bar Avhuna came to the Reish Galusa's house to eat. So the Gemara says, Pasach bechada b'stem b'tarting. He opened up with one bracha, and he finished with two. What are we talking about? Says Rashi, Kishehischel bebracha loy amar rachim. Hashem al Yisrael amecha v'al Yerushalayim yirecha ela achas mehem. In the bracha of Rachim, about a third of the way down on Mem Tes, in the bracha of Rachim, he didn't say al Yisrael amecha v'al Yerushalayim yirecha, but rather one of them. Why? I don't know, but he just said one of them. Either he said Rachim al Yisrael amecha, or he said Rachim al Yerushalayim yirecha. Either one of those. But v'tziyem b'tarti. But he finished with both. That is to say, when he finished the bracha of Rachim, he said, Mashiach Yisrael ben Yerushalayim. Right? Because imagine if you're saying Rachim, no, Yisrael Amecha v'Yerushalayim Yiracha. That's two different things. So when you finish the bracha, you said, Hashem b'nei baracham v'Yerushalayim Amen. So he didn't just do that. He also did b'nei baracham of Yerushalayim Mashiach Yisrael. He did both. He concluded the bracha with two, but when he opened the bracha of Rachim, he only said one. Says the Gemara, Amar Rav Chizda Gevorta lemechtam betarti. What? That kanaka? Says Rav Chizda. It's like grace the kanaka, this Rabbi Bar Avuna. Why? Because he finished the bracha with two things. V'atanya, we know Rabbi taught us, V'atanya, Rabbi Yemen Chayis Mishtayim. Rabbi taught us that you're not supposed to be finished with bracha with two things. So you, Rabbi Bar Avuna, you grace the kanaka, you, right? Not only didn't do the bracha the way we normally do it, which is we do have two mentions in the bracha. We say Rachim no, Yisrael and Mechav Yerushalayim Rachim. But in the Chasim, we only do one. We only do Bani Yerushalayim. But you, when you said Rachim, you only did one. You only did Al Yisrael and Mechav, or you did Al Yerushalayim Rachim. But when you concluded, then you did two. That's when you came up with two. But that's against what Rabbi says. Rebbe says you're not supposed to be finishing a bracha with two things, only with one. Says the Gemara now a bit of a detour. The Gemara detours now to understand why don't we do two. Says the Margufa Rebbe Omer Ein Chayes Mishtayim. Rebbe says you're not able to make a chatima of the brachas with two. Why not? Eistve Levi Rebbe. So Levi asked Rebbe. Right, Levi was a student of Rebbe. So Levi asks him, well, you're saying you're not allowed to do two chasimas, two things in the chasima, two in Yanim. What about Al Aretz Al Amazayin? Right, you say thanking Hashem for the land of Israel and for the food. So he says, no, it's one thing. Eretz the Mafka Mazayin. We're talking about the land that gives forth the food. So he says, what about Al Aretz Al Paris? Right, in the bracha bein shalosh, you say Al Aretz Al Paris. And he gives the same answer. Eretz the Mafka Paris. Same answer, right? The land that gives forth the Paris. Because Yisrael has manim. So what is the answer on this one? What about we say now in davening? We say that we're sanctifying the Jewish people and the day. They're two different things. The Jewish people and the day, they're not the same. Says the Rebbe, no. Yisrael dakit shinu l'zmanim. The Jewish people are mekadosh this manim. So it's really one thing. Right? It's really one thing. So then they asked another one, what about Mekadosh Tov Rosh Chodashim? What about the Jewish people and the Rosh Chodesh? Two different things. So he gives the same answer. Yisrael Dakachin of Rosh Chodashim. You haven't gained anything on this one. It's the same thing. The same two that you think that you're catching me on. No. It's also one thing. It's the Jewish people are Mekadosh the Chodesh. The Mekadosh is man. Then he asked him, what about Mekadosh HaShabbos V'Yisrael V'Hazmanim? What about a situation when you have Shabbos and Yantif? And you say Mekadosh HaShabbos V'Yisrael V'Hazmanim. There you have two things. Why do you have two things? Rashi explains. What does Rashi say over here? Mekadosh HaShabbos V'Yisrael V'Hazmanim B'Hachol Lekal Emem Yisrael Mekadosh LaShabbos. Here you can't say that the Jewish people are Mekadosh the Shabbos and the Zman, Dilu Zman, Flim based on Mekadosh Chodashim Al Piyariyah, because the Zmanim they are Mekadosh Al Yidei Bnei Yisrael, Mekadosh Al Piyariyah, etc. But Shabbos, Avol Shabbos Kedisha V'Kaima. Shabbos doesn't depend on you, doesn't depend on anybody to Mekadosh it. It is of itself. So if it is of itself, then what's the ability that we have to say both? So you say that you're not able to do two endings in a bracha. As we're going to see in a minute why you're not able to. But here you see a situation where you're talking about two things, Shabbos and the Yisrael V'Hazmanim, which is obviously not the same thing. Two separate things. They're not totally one or the other. Shabbos is not totally in the Kiddush of Yisrael. In fact, Gemara says that here is a situation where we have an exception. So Rabbi says, Chutz mizu, this one is an exception. You're right. All the other ones I can answer for, but I don't have an answer for this one. So says the Gemara, I don't understand. So Maishna, why is this one different? Like you managed to find the answer to everything, but now you say all of a sudden this is a situation you have an exception. But what is it? Why would this be different? So the Gemara says, Hacha chadahi hasam tarti. Here it's one thing, but there it's two. And kol chada v'chada b'ape nafshe. And each thing that is separate, we want to do separately. So what does it mean? What is the Gemara asking and answering over here? The Gemara saying, Ma'ishna, what's the difference over here? What's the difference over here where we're saying that you're able to do it? I say not able to make a bracha on two things. When it came to Bani Yerushalayim and Mashiach Yisrael, there we said, oh, no. There you can't do it. What's the difference? If it's two things, by Mekadosh Shabbos Yisrael V'Hazmanim, and it's two things by Mashiach Yisrael and Bani Yerushalayim, then they should have the same halacha. Obviously, it's not exactly identical. And that's the Gemara saying is the truth is that even though Mekadosh Shabbos Yisrael V'Hazmanim sounds like it's two things, it's really ultimately one. Whereas by Bani Yerushalayim, Mashiach Yisrael, it's really two separate things, and that's where they have to be said separately. So Rashi explains. Rashi said, really, when you say Mekadesh Hashabbos v'Yisrael v'Azmanim Ein Kan Ela Bruchas Mekadesh, really what's going on is one thing. What's the one thing? We have to isolate it. We're not talking about Yisrael. That's or Mekadesh Yisrael v'Azmanim and Shabbos, and that's not where the focus is. You know what the one is? The one is on the Mekadesh. What do we mean when we say the one is on the Mekadesh? Shemevarach la'Kadosh Baruch Hu. What the Brachot is doing is blessing the Rebbeinu Shalom, thanking Hashem. Shemekadesh HaShabbos ve'Azmanim. That Hashem made Shabbos Kodesh, and He made the Zmanim Kodesh. So therefore, there's a unity here that is different than by Bnei Yerushalayim and Mashiach Yisrael, because really the focal point is on the Mekadesh. Mekadesh HaShabbos v'Yisrael v'Azmanim, and the Mekadesh is one. It's Hashem. Aval says Rashi, Mashiach Yisrael, Bnei Yerushalayim Tarti Mili Ninu, but Bnei Yerushalayim and what do you call Mashiach Yisrael? Those are two things. Bein Kedel and Beis Dvarim b'Bracha Achas. We don't bring together two things in one. Now, if you pardon me for being a bit of a doubting Thomas on it, I'm sorry. I don't understand. You now all of a sudden Mekadesh is the key. That's the key. Not Hashabbos v'Yisrael v'Azmanim. That's not really. That's not the main part of the bracha. So I wanted to share with you also what Rabbeinu Yomi says. Rabbeinu Yomi, he has his answer. It's a little different than Rashi. If you look at Rabbeinu Yomi, in my version of the Daf Arif, it's on Daf Lamed Vav. So Rabbeinu Yomi says like this. Says Rabbeinu Yomi. He says like this. Number one, remember how we said before that Shuas Yisrael and Bnei Yerushalayim is one thing? Because, as Rashi noted, Shuas Yisrael, He Binyan Yerushalayim, the saving of the Jews, that is the building of Jerusalem. So, the first thing that the Rabbeinu Yomi points out that that's not the case. The Divrei Maschil is Amar Le, it's about halfway down. He says like this. He says, "Lefikach ena chayes Mashiach Yisrael by Yerushalayim b'shem nekol chad v'chad b'ad pei nafsh shara mitzinu kama psukim shemas kibem shuas Yisrael b'vad ve'ena mas kibem in Yerushalayim the siv Yisrael noisha b'asher and shuas leilamim, and we don't mention anything about Yerushalayim the rabbim ko'ela ulefikach dainin lu kishtay men chaysim bohem." Right. So the first part of Rabbeinu Yomi is that many times you find psukim in Tanakh that just talk about the saving of the Jewish people, don't mention Yerushalayim. So that you can't say Haba Italia, you can't say the same thing. There's Binyan Yerushalayim and there's Mashiach Yisrael. They're not the same. So that's why they're two things. That's why they can't be mentioned together as a chasima. Because why? We'll see in a second. Because we don't want to make mitzvahs chavilas. But what about Mekadesh Hashabbos v'Yisrael v'Azmanim? Avo Mekadesh Hashabbos v'Yisrael v'Azmanim afal pi shenirim kishtayim. Even though it seems like two inyan echadu, that's one thing. Shekedushas Yisrael tuluya b'kedushas Hashabbos, because the kedusha of the Jewish people is dependent on the kedusha of Shabbos. You know what the famous line is: more than the Jew has preserved or has kept the Sabbath has preserved or kept the Jew. This is it. This is literally the source. Shekedushas Yisrael tuliya b'kedushas Hashabbos, u'kedushas Hazmanim v'Rosh Chodashim tuliya b'kedushas Yisrael. B'kevan shetoli zebazeh k'moi kedusha achas deinin lei. Says Rabbeinu Yomi. It's not a word like Rashi says. We're talking about the Mekadesh. No, Mekadesh Hashabbos v'Yisrael Hazmanim is one thing, because kedushas Yisrael is dependent on kedushas Shabbos, and kedushas Hazmanim is dependent on kedushas Yisrael. So therefore, we view it all as one thing because they're all interconnected. Whereas Bnei Yerushalayim and Shuas Yisrael are not the same. We live here in America, and we have Yeshua. It doesn't have to be always in Yerushalayim. Therefore, we cannot mention two things in Bnei Yerushalayim. because that would be make chavilas chavilas. That'd be like trying to chap. We don't want to chap. But because Shabbos Yisrael Azmanim is able to be considered one thing. Even though Rebbe said chutz mizu, we nevertheless still consider one enough. Now the Gemara says a fundamental line that one needs to notice in a major halacha, that what? So says the Gemara, time of my ain't chayis mishtayim. So why is it that we don't in fact finish off a bracha with two things? What's wrong? Because we want to make the mitzvahs the packages. Why do we want to make mitzvahs the packages? The Rashbam tells us because it's like a masui. It's like a burden on us. It's like a burden. We don't want it to be a burden. So we'll just spend a minute talking about the sugi of ein oisem mitzvahs chavilas. The Gemara there, it's relevant now coming up to Pesach. So the Gemara there in Pesachim Kuf Beis tells us that you can't make the bracha of one of the cups of wine and do the second cup on the first cup. In other words, you make each cup of wine a separate cup. Why? Because the ein oisem mitzvahs chavilas. Taisus there says, big Taisus, the very fundamental halacha Taisus, says that this is why you have two separate cups when it comes to, let's say, the chasana, when it comes to benching by Shevrach, right? You have a bracha of Hagefen, right? You have a bracha on the Mazan, you have a bracha on the Shevrach brachas. At the chasana, you have a bracha on the Birchas Erison, you have a bracha on the Birchas Nesuin. Separate brachas. Why do you have to have separate brachas? Because they know it's the mitzvahs chavilas. You don't want to make it like a matzah, like, okay, let's chap around another mitzvah on the cup. Taisa says over there that we also have a custom. Some of the Baalei Taisa didn't agree. So it says, Rabbeinu Tam said, no, you have to do separate cups. And in order to ensure it, that it's not going to even be a question, you have to have a separate cup for the Birchas Nesuin. That's why we what? That's why we read the Ksuba. We read the Ksuba in between. Now it's a hefsek. So for sure, you have to make a separate bracha of Hagafen for the Birchas Nesuin. Right? This has practical ramifications to halacha. Why? Because what happens on Shabbos, right? If we have Shal Shudas on Shabbos and Shul, what do we do? You have a minyan, you have to make a bracha on a kais. So do we drink the kais? Don't drink the kais. What's Shulchan Aruch write? Shulchan Aruch writes in Reish Sadi Test, you drink the kais. Shulchan Aruch says you drink the kais. Of course you drink the kais. The only if you don't have another kais, if you don't have any extra wine, so then you can save it for Havdalah. But if you have, then you don't use it for Havdalah. It will be a problem. It's chavilas. What's the answer to the question? The answer is, and the reason why we don't over here drink it is because Magen Avraham writes that that's true. What the Shulchan Aruch writes for people who are always mekanish on the kais. But for people who are not mekanish on the kais generally, so for them it's also to drink from the kais. You're not supposed to drink before Havdalah. And therefore, you can use the kais from Merchas Hamazon to Havdalah. In fact, I say it's stronger. To just use the cup for Berachas Hamazon and not to drink from it, it's to make a mockery out of it. It's a non-use. Maybe it calls into question what you were doing with this cup of wine in the first place. So therefore, we have to find a way to be matter to drink it. And so therefore, Havdalah is a good way to use it. Not a situation of chavilas, not a situation of masoi. It's a way to use it for something. Otherwise, it would not have been used. And if you remember, I tried to get this across before. Where do we discuss it? Remember the Gemara Lamed Tesla Beis. Seems like a while ago now. The Gemara told us in the bottom line there in Lamed Tesla Beis. The Gemara told us about situations where they made a Rubik Chateris, right? And they wanted to then make on the Rubik Chateris, they wanted to use it for Hamaitzi. So I asked, why isn't nobody talking about it in the minutes of Chavilas? No one asked the question. So I want to make a distinction. And I think the distinction is correct. Depends on perspective. If the word is you had something that was done, you had a you did something with this, but now it will otherwise be unused, unutilized. You could use it for something. You're going to be able to make a mitzvah out of it, do something good with it. So that's not a masoi. You're enhancing it. You have a bracha to be able to make on this cup of wine that otherwise would not be used. It's not a masoi. But it's a situation you're chapping. That's a situation where we consider it a masoi. And so each case you have to figure out what the distinction would be. The way I see it as the distinction is what took place in the past. When you're sitting there by the Seder and you made a hagafen, a kiddush on the first cup of wine, and then you want to save it for the second cup. It's not something in the past. That's all occurring now in the present. The Brachot, all that's take place previously. So now you have another chance to utilize something. So I don't consider that to be a masui. Or something that's in the present, then you want to add another mitzvah to it. You want to put in a bracha, a second ending. That's all in the present. That's like a matzah. And that's the situation of chapilas. So now the Gemara comes back to what we're saying. Says the Gemara, my avi Allah. So what in the end? What in the end is the law? What in the end is the in fact halacha? Rav Sheish pasuk barachim al amcha Yisrael. You open up with rachim al amcha Yisrael. Place in Mashiach Yisrael, and you end off with Mashiach Yisrael. That's his version, right? Rav Sheish's version of how we do rachim. Pasuk barachim al Yisrael laim chesem v'anim shalayim. And if you open up with Rachim al Yushalayim, then you finish the Bnei Yushalayim. So Rav Sheish basically gives you options. You can either do the Mashiach Yisrael version, or you can do the Bnei Yushalayim version. Rav Nachman disagrees. I feel a pasuk Rachim al Yisrael. Even if somebody opened up with Rachim al Yisrael and he didn't say Bnei Yushalayim, he still has to finish Bnei Yushalayim. Mishum shene'emar, because pasuk says Bnei Yushalayim Hashem will build Jerusalem. Nidche Yisrael Yechanes. Then the scattered of the Jewish people will return. So again, look at the pasuk carefully. Bnei Yushalayim Hashem will build Jerusalem. Nidche Yisrael Yechanes. The scattered ones of Jerusalem would return. What's the order you think it is? What's the order? First, God will build Jerusalem and then return. Says Rav Nachman, no. When will God rebuild Jerusalem? After the Jewish people have returned. This Gemara is a fundamental Gemara. You need to remember this Gemara because this is the contrary, one of the main contrary Gemaras. There are many. This is one of the main contrary Gemaras against those who always quote the Shalosh Shavuos Gemaras and Ksubas Kuf Yud Aleph, saying that you're not allowed to go to Eretz Yisrael. It's in violation of the oaths. Says Rav Nachman, no. Your Jerusalem is only going to be rebuilt by the Rebbeinu Shalom if the Jewish people return to Israel first. First, the Jews have to return, and then God will rebuild the temple. First, the Jews have to return. This is, of course, proved as well by the Gemara we just had Purim, right? The Gemara Megillah Yud Zayin. The Gemara tells us there about the order of the brachas that you have for Shemona Esrei. And the Gemara says, well, why is this Feinu in this order and this? And each one we say, why in the order has to be? And the Gemara asks, why does Kabbalah Shofar? Kibbutz Golis has to come along after after the bracha and Parnasa. And the Gemara says, because that's how it has to be in order to have the Jews come back. And then you have the return of the Jewish people to the land of Israel. Then they get back their the land of. Then they get that back, Yerushalayim, and Mashiach comes. That's why you first have Kibbutz Goliath, and then you have Yerushalayim Mircha and Esar David Avdecha. You first have to have Kibbutz Goliath before you have Ben Yerushalayim. You first have to have Ben Yerushalayim before you have Esar David. And the lashon of the Gemara is that the kibbutz Goliath is going to be before Ben Yerushalayim, The Kevan Shedivnes Yerushalayim, says the Gemara, but David, once Yerushalayim is rebuilt, then David can come. This is absolutely contrary. These are fundamental contrary examples to those that want to say the Shalosh. Again, for those that believe that the Shalosh was have a halachic significance, there are other answers, right? Namely, the fact that the Gemara there says that there were various Shuas, right? Shalial Chayma. Is it a Chayma? If the world gives you permission, if they have a United Nations vote that says you can go back, is it a considered merit against the Ummais? If the Ummais also have their own Shvuah, and they destroy the Jewish people and they commit Holocaust and genocides, do we have to keep by our oaths? All these are major questions and not for our topic now. What is for our topic now is that one of the fundamental challenges to the anti-Zionist fringe who don't understand is simply these kinds of Gemaras. But Pashut Gemara says the opposite. You have to go back in order to be able to bring Mashiach. The Jews have to return. This is one of the sources of that. Continues the Gemara. Amalei Rav Zera Rav Chizda. So now Rav Zera said to Rav Chizda. So again, we had a machlokes from Rav Sheish from Nachman. Rav Nachman says you always have to finish the Bnei Yerushalayim. Again, and the way we do it is we do both Mashiach Yisrael and Bnei Yerushalayim. At the beginning, we say Rachim Noah. Right, we mentioned both Bnei Yerushalayim and Mashiach Yisrael, but we conclude only with one thing because we conclude Bnei Yerushalayim like Rav Nachman said. So Amalei Rav Zera le Rav Chizda. Rav Zera said to Rav Chizda, Nesi Mar V'Nisnei. Says Rav Chizda, "Nu teach us something. Teach us some Mishnayos." So Amalei Berchas Mezayda le Gamirna. Utzuniyah Masnista. He says, "I didn't even learn how to bench. You want me to teach you Mishnayos?" So Amalei my high. Rav Zera says to Rav Chizda, "What are you talking about?" Amarlei. So Rav Chizda responds to Rav Zera. He says, he says, I also was eating by the Reish Galusa's house. And I benched. It was a keeper of Rav Sheish's Lekuye or like Kechivya. And Rav Sheish straightened out his neck like a snake. Meaning he was very angry. He stiffened his neck at me like a snake. This is, you have to remember, of course, the Gemara at the top of Yud Beis on the base. Remember the Gemara told us, Rav Sheish says, how would he bow? He kara kechizra. And how would he get up when he said Baruch Atah Hashem? Because zakiv kechivya. He would get up like a snake. Here's Mamash, another perfect example. Sheshes would stretch out his neck like a snake. Right? We had many interactions with Rav Sheshes, Rav Chizda. Right? We had a Gemara. Remember, we had a Gemara on what was it, Lamed? Yeah, we had a Gemara on Lamed about Rav Sheshes, Rav Chizda when they were going on the road. About how do you say Tfilas Haderech, sitting or standing? And Rav Sheshes was blind, so he didn't see what Rav Chizda was doing. I don't know if he was blind in this story or not. In any event, he got very angry at Rav Sheshes, got very angry at Rav Chizda, something that he did during benching, and he stretched out his neck like a snake. So the Rav Zera says to him, why did he get so angry at you? What did you do wrong? So he says, because I didn't mention bris in benching, I didn't mention malchus. I didn't mention any of these things in benching. So he says, so he says, why didn't you do that? Why not? So he says, because Rav Chanan al-Marav. Because like I did it like Chanan al-Marav. Chanan was a student of Rav. Many times we find him in Shas. We had him before. If you remember in Brachot, we had him where we had Mem Gimel. We had him Laman Zion. Rav Chanan will say in the name of Rav. What did he say? Then Rav Chanan al-Marav. If somebody doesn't say bris v'Torah u'malchus, is yatsa. Somebody doesn't say bris in benching, Torah in benching, or malchus in benching, is yatsa. Why is the yatsa? Bris l'vishen benashim. Right, we're very egalitarian. Since women they don't have al bris l'shchasanto sarenu. Right. Obviously, we hold women are kimhalya dominating. Mar Shabbos tells us, okay. So he didn't want to say bris. It wasn't, it wasn't for both men and women. Torah malchus. He didn't mention Torah malchus. Why l'pishen loy benashim loy ba'avadim. Women don't have a chiyuv of Talmud Torah. So that's why he didn't want to do this. So Rav Zir says to him, "V'ad shaftis kohani tanoi v'amroi v'avadet l'karav." I don't understand. You abandoned all these tanoim and amiram, and you did like Rav. Like seriously, what's gotten into you? I understand why Rav Sheshes got angry at you, right? Why did you do that? Now here, I have a line that I didn't say over clearly on Friday because we hadn't yet gotten here. But now that we got here, I can go back to a line that we had in the Gemara. The line that comes up throughout Brachot, many times you had it. And I said to you, look at the more at the top of the page. Damar Rav Ilam Rav Yaakov Barachim Mishum Rabbeinu. Kol Shalom or Bris V'Torah B'Rechas Haaretz U'Malchus Beis David B'Bani Yerushalayim Lo Yotzi Dechavos. Anybody who doesn't say what Bris and Torah and B'Rechas Haaretz and Malchus Beis David in Bani Yerushalayim is not Yotzi the mitzvah. And I said to you, who is Mishum Rabbeinu? And I mentioned to you how many times in Brachot do we have Mishum Rabbeinu, and what did Rashi tell us in many of the times when we say Mishum Rabbeinu? What does Rashi say? Rashi tells us that who is Mishum Rabbeinu? Mishum Rabbeinu is Rav. Rashi mentioned this again and again. Again and again, Rashi told us that Mishum Rabbeinu is Rav. And I said, but there are certain times when clearly Mishum Rabbeinu can't be Rav. And we proved already at least one place that has to be Shmuel. And over here, we have to prove it that it can't be Rav either. Why are we proving that over here? It's for sure not Rav. Because what does Rav say? Rav says, oh my. Rav says that when you say benching and you don't say bris v'torah malchus, you still yotzi dechavasai. And what does Mishum Rabbeinu over here say? Kol shalom bris v'torah b'rechas haaretz malchus davar shlam lo yotzi dechavasai. So this Mishum Rabbeinu can't be Rav. This Mishum Rabbeinu maybe is Rabbeinu HaKadosh, but it cannot be Rav, that's for sure. Clear? Okay, we have to move along. Says the Gemara, Amar Rav Chana, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Atoiv ha'meitiv tzricha malchus. Atoiv ha'meitiv requires malchus. Right? In the bracha of Atoiv ha'meitiv, we have to say malchus. We open it up, we say Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam. So there's the malchus number one. But we also say malchus additionally, right? Remember, we say there, Avinu malkeinu advinu berenu kol inu tzuneka d'shen kadesh ha'kavinu v'sei melech atoiv ha'meitiv hakol. So we say malchus 3 times. We say Hashem Melech 3 times in the bracha of Atoiv ha'meitiv. So my Kamashman, what is Rabbi Chana saying? What is he teaching us? The name of Rabbi Yochanan, the malchus is required in the bracha of Ben Yerushalayim. So kol bracha she'ein ba malchus lo yishma bracha. To say that according to Rabbi Yochanan, the famous shita we already had it a few times on Yud Beis, on Mem. Rabbi Yochanan holds that every bracha that doesn't have malchus is not called a bracha. We already know that. That's pashut. Rabbi Yochanan Chadazim, Rabbi Yochanan already told us this once. Amar Rabbi Zera, malchus. Rather, what this is coming to teach us is that we have 2 malchus. What is Rabbi Chana teaching us in Rabbi Yochanan? 2 malchus. Chada d'day, v'chada d'ben Yerushalayim. You have to say 2 times malchus, once here and once in Ben Yerushalayim. Right? Because in Ben Yerushalayim you don't say malchus, so we're saying it over here. Says the Gemara, ihachi neboy tzlas. Then, if so, you should say it 3 times. Chada d'day, right? Once for itself. V'chada d'ben Yerushalayim, v'chada d'berachas haaretz. You should say malchus 3 times, once for itself for Atoiv ha'meitiv, once for Ben Yerushalayim, and once for B'rachas haaretz. B'rachas haaretz, my time aloi. Why don't you say malchus in B'rachas haaretz? Mishum dahavli b'rachas smucha l'chaverta. Right, because the b'rachas smucha l'chaverta. We said already that you don't have, when you have another bracha, you don't have to open up with another baruch. So Ben Yerushalayim not related to boy. So Ben Yerushalayim also doesn't need a malchus. Why? Because it's also considered brachas smucha l'chaverta. So I didn't have to Ben Yerushalayim not be like boy. So Ben Yerushalayim and the brachas smucha l'chaverta. So you shouldn't need malchus at all. So if you don't need malchus at all, so then what are you saying that you have to have a malchus for Ben Yerushalayim? Says the Gemara, "Adi the Amar Malchus Beis David, Lav Erech Ara, the Loy Amar Malchus Shemayim." Once you already mentioned Malchus Beis David, that you're already saying that in the bracha of Rachel, so then it's not nice that you're not going to say Malchus Shemayim. So therefore, we have to say Malchus Shemayim when we are going to catch up in Atoiv ha'meitiv. Additionally, that wouldn't necessarily be required. Again, we've already mentioned before, if you remember on the top of the page, when we did on Friday, we said that if you hold them that the bracha of Atoiv ha'meitiv is Rabbanon, right? So then it's not a bracha smuch l'chaverta, and then it's going to be required to say a bracha at the beginning. Okay. Rav Papa Amar Haki Kamar. Rav Papa says no, not like what Rabbi Zera is saying. A different point. What does it mean when Rabbi Chana is saying in the name of Rabbi Yochanan that Atayv Ametiv is Tzricha Malchus? It's not because Bnei Yerushalayim mentioned Malchus Beis David, and if we want to make up for just saying Malchus Beis David, say Malchus Shamayim, so if we make another Malchus, he says a different point. Rav Papa Amar Haki Kamar Tzricha Shtei Malchus Levar Midei. It needs two Malchus aside from itself. That's what Rabbi Rachana was saying. He was saying Atayv Meitav needs Malchus aside from itself. Itself it needs Malchus because again it's the fact of it's not a bracha, it's its own bracha, and that it needs its own Malchus mentioned in it as well. And what is the Malchus that it needs? As Rashi says, Avinu Malkeinu Hamelach Atayv Meitav, except Levar Midei, except for the way it opens up of Paisachas Baruch Hatasham Makinam Melech Ha'olam, which you would need because it's not a Baruch Smukh L'Chavita because it was created by the Avrugei Beitar. Now we have a different Gemara. Rav Zera, Yosef Rav Zera Achur, Rav Gidel, Yosef Rav Gidel Kamei Rav Huna. Yosef V'Komar, Rav Zera was sitting behind Rav Gidel, was sitting by Rav Huna, and he said like this: Tov L'Hizkish Shal Shabbos. If somebody forgot to mention it today, he has a special bracha to say. I'm a bracha nas no Shabbos nas tamnuch al amei so be'aval lo'is lebris bracha mekadosh Shabbos. You have a bracha to say if you forgot to mention ritzei. Amar le'man Amar, who says this halacha that if you forgot ritzei you have a bracha to make? Rav said that. Hada Yosef v'Kamar Tov L'Hizkish Shal Yom Tov. One of those you forgot Yal v'Yavai. Amar bracha nas and Yom Tov Lam B'Shol Simchos Dikarin bracha mekadosh Tov Azmanim. Amar le'man Amar, who says this that you have a bracha to say if you forgot Yal v'Yavai? Rav. What if you forgot Rosh Chodesh? If you forgot to mention Yav Rosh Chodesh, Amar Rosh Chodesh, Lam Yisrael Zikarin. See, another bracha that you could say, but he wasn't sure if you say Simcha in this or not. He didn't know if you end up with a bracha or not. Did he mention this from Rav or not? He didn't remember this. Gidel Bar Menyume have a kokame. The Rav Nachman, Gidel Bar Menyume was standing in front of Rav Nachman. Torah Rav Nachman will finally turn the page. V'hadol Reish, Rav Nachman forgot to say in the benching, he forgot to say Ritzei, but V'hadol Reish, he went back to the beginning. Why did he go back to the beginning of Berachas Hamazon? Because he was taught this is like davening. He was Eiker Raglayim, so now he has to go back. So Amar Lei, my time of Mar Haki, he says, why did you do this? Why are you going back? Why do you mention the bracha? Because he says that we have a lesson from Rav. That Rav says that if you forgot, you have to go back to the beginning. We'll have to stop over here and finish the rest of the Testament based tomorrow. Okay.